You know, recently, as I turn and do a hard 180, when we talk about needs that occur in families, who would have foreseen within the Guillen family in Killeen, Texas, not far from Austin, the state's capital, that a young lady, a private in the Army, would meet such a terrible and tragic end? And we're going to listen now to our next featured speaker. He is the Secretary of the Army. His name is Ryan McCarthy. Let's listen in.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to participate in LULAC's 2020 virtual conference. I need to begin by saying how deeply saddened and deeply troubled we are by the loss of one of our own, Specialist Vanessa Guillen. We have felt the loss of her in our formations and across the nation. We will continue to honor Vanessa's legacy and are committed to make enduring change for the betterment of each individual. As we take steps to ensure our Army is a more inclusive organization, we also would like to strengthen the Army's relationship with LULAC and the Hispanic community as a whole. The Army's strength comes from our diverse force, and we must increase our efforts to ensure that we are representative of the nation. We will need your help maintaining the momentum of engaging with the young men and women within your communities. This effort ensures a continued tradition of Hispanic service members serving with distinction in times of both peace and of war. In addition, we must ensure that Hispanic service members are able to serve without the hurdles of discrimination, have opportunities to progress through the ranks at every level, and are able to do so without fear from criminal acts such as sexual assault and harassment. This year has been a time of reckoning in the Army. We as an organization are taking a hard look at ourselves to ensure we remain representative of the nation and that our service members have the opportunity to realize their individual potential. The Army and the nation will be better because of it. Thanks, and best wishes for a successful conference.
I want to thank, and so does LULAC, Secretary Ryan McCarthy, who recently gave our national president, Domingo Garcia, and our CEO, Cindy Benavides, an opportunity to meet at the Pentagon to talk about the Guillen tragedy. And we call it a tragedy because indeed, it is part of a larger trend, or if you will, a concern that is occurring within the ranks of the military, beginning in the Army. And that's the issue that the next panel is going to discuss. The disappearance of Vanessa Guillen was the beginning of a question and certainly the continuation of the concerns that many people in our community have been lifting for some time, and that is the abuse, the harassment, and the mistreatment of our young soldiers in uniform. And to carry on that discussion, we have invited a panel of wonderful experts, people who are very familiar with this situation. And I would like to begin by introducing the moderator, Keta Rodriguez. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Welcome everyone to our panel discussion during our LULAC 2020 virtual summit. I'm very happy to be here today, joined with a very esteemed panel of guests. Our panel discussion today is Change is Coming, Honoring and Protecting Those Who Served Our Country. Obviously, in the light of the disappearance and murder of Vanessa Guillen, our entire country has been made aware of the very dire situation that our women and people in the military face. With that, we wanted to have a discussion to find out more about the experiences of some women, our panelists, that they've had, and share some thoughts on what we can do moving forward. At this time, I'm going to introduce our very esteemed group, beginning with retired Colonel Michelle M. Hernandez de Frailey. Colonel Frailey received her commission as a second lieutenant from the United States Military Academy as the first female from Puerto Rico to graduate from West Point in 1984. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree with a concentration in Russian and German, a master's in business administration, a master's of science in international relations, a master of arts in national security and strategic studies, and a doctor of management and organizational leadership. She recently completed a master of arts in education, adult education and training. She's also a graduate of the Signal Officer Basic and Advanced courses, the Command and General Staff College, and the Joint Staff Officer course, and the Navy War College. During her very distinguished career, she served in many vital roles throughout the US and around the world, having deployed to the Republic of Panama and supported forces in Kosovo. She also served as a White House communications, in the White House Communications Agency, and she also served as the Chief of Staff, U.S. Army Network Enterprise Technology Command, and as well as a Director of Capabilities Development and Integration Directorate. Her last assignment prior to retirement was from the U.S. Army in, retirement from the U.S. Army in 2014. She was a commander of the Warrior Transition Brigade in the National Capital Region. She has numerous decorations, as I'm sure that you can imagine. But upon her retirement, she was hired by the Puerto Rico Police Department. On 2 January of 2016, she assumed duties as a superintendent after almost 3 years as a provost of the Puerto Rico Police Academy. Additionally, she serves as the director of the Selective Service System for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Michelle, it's such an honor to have you with us today. Our next panelist is Lisa Carrington Furman, who serves as the Associate Vice President for Veteran and Military Affairs and Military Liaison at the University of Texas at San Antonio. As the founding leader for Veteran and Military Affairs, she oversaw the consolidation and realignment of all veteran support services on campus and the creation of the Center for Military Affiliated Students to better support and serve veterans and military affiliated students. She has been featured on Latin Biz Today, Everyday People Make the World Go Round in 2020, on San Antonio's Movers and Shakers radio show in 2019, and in San Antonio Magazine of 2018. She's also a published author, having written numerous books and articles related to student veteran transition. Colonel Furman retired from the United States Air Force and is as its most senior ranking Latina officer after leading UTSA's ROTC program to the best in the nation and being awarded a Bronze Star Medal for her efforts in combat as an Expeditionary Mission Support Group commander in Iraq's Sunni Triangle. She has received many honors and accolades. She is a founder for the Board of Trustees, a member of the Veterans Healthy Minds Advisory Council, and numerous other boards. Colonel Furman is also the founder and CEO of Carrington Furman LLC, which provides consulting services in the areas of leadership, veteran transition, diversity, and inclusion. Lisa, it's such an honor to have you with us here today. Last but certainly not least, our next panelist is Carrie F. Ritchie, Associate General Counsel, Marketing, Regulatory, and Food Safety Program Division, Office of the General Counsel, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as its Senior Executive Service. Ms. Ritchie leads a team of 30 attorneys and professional support staff that provide legal services to both the marketing and regulatory programs and the food safety mission areas of USDA. Prior to joining USDA, Ms. Ritchie served as an Assistant General Counsel with the Department of Defense Education Activity, a field activity consisting of 14 school districts servicing children in grades K through 12 in locations spanning the globe. Prior to joining DODEA, Ms. Ritchie served on active duty in the U.S. Army for 22 years. Ms. Ritchie is a 1988 graduate of Georgetown University, where she was commissioned as the Adjutant General's Corps through the ROTC program. As a lieutenant, Ms. Ritchie has operated 5 military post offices in Germany and later deployed in support of Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield. She has served in numerous capacities, including deployments in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. Ms. Ritchie holds a LLM in intellectual property law from George Washington University School of Law, and is also in military law from the Judge Advocate General's Legal Center and School. She is a graduate of the Judge Advocate Basic and Graduate courses and the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. It's an honor to have you here, Carrie.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to go ahead and move on to our questions for our panelists, and we welcome them to share their very frank opinions, which I'm sure they will all do. They're all very extremely accomplished and strong women. I'm sure that they did not get to where they were without showing, demonstrating that they have the ability to lead and to, be very open and frank in their discussions. So I'm going to start with Carrie. And actually, I think I would like for each one of you to address this particular question, and we'll kind of just talk a little bit about your experience in the military. So what was it like being a woman in the armed services?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I really enjoyed my almost 22 years in the Army. I served in a lot of units where they were predominantly male combat arms units. And I had very positive experiences, but I served as a judge advocate for most of my career. And I did see the downside for women who were in units with predominantly male occupational specialties. And I would say that the military can be a wonderful place to build a career, but it is not a combat multiplier to have sexual harassment within the ranks. And as a prosecutor, I did see where that happened. And I want to be here today to say that we can solve this problem. And I think there are some very concrete ways to do that. In my experience, it starts with the leadership. I had a very wonderful colonel who served as a brigade commander that I advised when I was a prosecutor, and he did things right. And I noticed that in that organization, we did not have the same problems that other organizations did. So to answer your question, I had a great career. I loved being in the Army, but there are problems and there are ways to solve them.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the same question of Michelle. Michelle, can you talk a little bit about your experience as a woman in the military?
Sure. And probably for me, the biggest and probably the most impacting thing in my career was my 4 years at West Point. Probably one thing that made a big difference in my 30 years in the Army was the upbringing at West Point. And from the onstart, all the training, discussions that are done, on the topics of sexual harassment, sexual assault. We have the 3-man rule that as a woman, you always have at least 2 other people, with you. And throughout my 30 years, I had some wonderful experiences deploying with NATO armed forces that had no women in their military. I still remember when I was in Kosovo having to go to one of the TV towers to ensure that we kept control so that all parties had equal opportunity for dissemination. And they told me to, get with, I had to leave in a vehicle with a Navy person and met with a Italian infantry company. At that time, the Italian Army had no women. And I mean, you talk about, that poor lieutenant having an emotional event when this, Army major, comes in as a site commander. But I think it goes back to what Carrie mentioned, this is all about leadership and supervision. And when you're surrounded with good leaders and people who know about leadership and supervision, a lot of things can be overcome. And again, my NATO experience, and again, with the School of the Americas, with armed forces from Central and South America that have no women, leadership really made the difference.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Lisa, I'm going to ask you the same question, or just for you to just speak a little bit about your experience in the military as a woman.
Yeah, well, I'll say on the positive side, I had a lot of great education and a lot of training, really outstanding training in the military. I think that's one thing we do that quite well. But I have to say, and I came in probably before these women came in, and I did serve 30 years. I retired in 2010 from the military after a 30-year career. I can tell you that I was never my authentic self in the military, ever. I have multiple identities, multiple intersections of identities, like a lot of women do. I mean, I'm a Latina. I'm first generation to go to college. I was a mother. I was married when I came in. When I came in, there were very few women that were married in the military. Most of them were single, and certainly very few, if any, had dependents. family members. So I was different from the very beginning. I remember being different. I remember being an other, you know, and back then there were very, very few women. And sadly, there aren't really that many more women today. If you look at the percentages across all the branches and all the services. But so I was always an outlier, always the other, you know, the other one. So I realized I was different from very early on. And I was harassed from the very moment I started my career in the military. And I was told that women shouldn't be in the military. And so I constantly had to prove myself that not only should women be in the military, but they could be outstanding and be great leaders. So I had that weighing on me for a long time. And I would say that the harassment started early on, was pretty much overt the first half of my career. The last half of my career, it became more covert, became more under the table, and it wasn't as overt and obvious, but it was still there. And I also want to make a comment about being in combat. When I served in Iraq in early 2004, I went to Iraq as a commander in the middle of the Sunni Triangle as a woman, of course, and I brought all my identities with me. And once I arrived in that environment, I felt like I stepped back in time. I felt like all the advancements we had made for women were just kind of washed away. Because that environment was definitely a hyper masculine environment, and there were it was very difficult for women in that combat environment. The way we were treated, the way we were talked to, the way we were dealt with. So I think it was worse in the combat environment for a lot of women. So there's some distinctions that need to be made when we talk about sexual harassment, sexual assault, both in the peacetime world and in the combat environment. So I think that's important, and we can talk about that maybe a little bit later.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that experience. You know, that actually brings to mind, you know, obviously with the case of Vanessa Guillen, who was, you know, who disappeared and was determined to be, you know, was found murdered. It has actually brought up a lot of emotions. It's really resonated with a lot of women. If you look at the hashtag I am Vanessa Guillen, women sharing their stories. And so this, you know, this is and from across generations, right? From our Korea, World War II, you know, Vietnam, all the way till today, post 9/11, female veterans, predominantly female veterans, you know, just talk about the experiences that they had. And so, you know, I would like to ask each of you what your thoughts are on specifically on the Vanessa Guillen case. In terms of either, you know, and we understand that, you know, not all of the facts are out, and we talk about leadership and all, and so we don't know everything, but just kind of some general thoughts on how this is really affected, you know, not just women. We're seeing community leaders, you know, speaking up about what is happening in the military, even those that have not served. And so just kind of just some general thoughts on the Vanessa Guillen case. And I will start with you, Michelle.
So as you mentioned, you know, most of what at least we have heard down here, it's, you know, based on newspaper articles, which, you know, a lot of times that don't capture, you know, what's going inside of the military. But I will tell you, you know, situations like this are what causes people to lose faith in the system. I would say that based on what I've read, the Department of the Army needs to conduct an investigation at the DIG level on the entire holistic approach to the what's called the SHARP program, because definitely, you know, as you read the comments from family members and others, you know, something, it's not working right in that particular unit, or it could be, you know, the command climate of a higher level unit. That's the other one. You know, when was the last command climate survey done? And what were the findings, and who's, you know, following it? Units are required to do quarterly EEO reports to the Department of the Army. And so if it's true that, you know, other folks knew about what was going on, you know, what was being done about it, and how come it was not captured. And probably the, you know, the one thing that maybe a lot of people haven't catch on this issue, you know, a person working in an arms room, and there is, again, just based on what we've read, you know, something doesn't look right in terms of the arms rooms procedures, because soldiers don't come in and out of arms rooms and go into other people's arms rooms without the documentation. There's monthly inspections that are done. There's a lot of scrutiny with arms rooms. And as you read some of these newspaper articles, it made it look like we were just moving from living rooms to living rooms, and that's not the way that it should be. So, my perception is that, there's quite a few things wrong that need to be investigated at a higher level, as opposed to letting the folks from Fort Hood, do it, because they might be part of the problem.
Thank you. Carrie, I'm going to ask you the same question. Just, in general, some just general thoughts about the Vanessa Guillen case.
Right. It immediately caught my attention, the idea that a soldier could be experiencing sexual harassment and not feel comfortable reporting it to the chain of command. And again, this is what we know from news reports. But if that is, in fact, what happened, it happens to a lot of women in the military. And so we really need to take another look at how reports are handled. I believe firmly that the Army needs to, and not just the Army, all military needs to create a safe place for a soldier to report, a safe environment and a process that is thorough regardless of who makes the report. Judgment has to be withheld until every report is thoroughly investigated and resolved. So that was immediately, I thought about how difficult it can be for a soldier to come forward and report sexual harassment, particularly if it's someone senior to him or her.
Thank you. Lisa, I'm going to ask you for your thoughts as well on the Vanessa Guillen case.
Well, I agree with my colleagues here, what they've already stated. It just deeply saddens me that it's 2020 and we still are talking about the same problems we've talked about for the last 30, 40 years. We have a leadership failure problem in the military. We have not taken this issue seriously, and we need to take it seriously. We need to do something about it, and we need to see change. We really need to change the way we approach these. And I agree. It's been said in the media, it's been said by Vanessa Guillen's familia, that we should have a third-party independent review system and reporting network. And I've been a commander multiple times, and I'd be the first one to tell you that, as a commander, I'll take care of my people. And I'll take care of them when they need to be disciplined, and I'll take care of them when they need to be recognized and promoted and that kind of thing, both ways, right? But I can tell you that that's not working anymore. For this particular issue, because we have the past to look at and we have not moved the needle on this issue. When a woman still today feels afraid to come forward, feels retaliation, feels she's going to be ostracized from the group, from her peers in her organization, feels she'll be labeled a non-performer when the victim is blamed, victim shaming. I mean, that is going on today still. So we have a problem, we need to fix it. So I'm deeply saddened. I feel so bad for her, her family, and all the women and men. Let's not forget the men too, who have also been experienced this kind of horrendous activities as well.
Absolutely, thank you for that. I think that for the Latino community in particular, we value service, we value military service. It's something that we're very proud of. And, I think all Americans, you hear thank you for your service and how much we honor and recognize our military. But I think that there's something a little bit special about the Latino community that when, and people of color in general, right, we go and we serve. I live here in San Antonio, Texas. Here in San Antonio, there's one particular school district that had like the most casualties during the Vietnam conflict, and that's the Edgewood Independent School District. And you can see, like, till today, even though that was a very, very controversial war, but no matter what, like, people have come together to support our military. So I'm gonna ask, what do you think that this does to mothers and fathers? And you've seen the Guillen family and even LULAC, have talked about, supporting sending their children, not that they don't support the military or that people that serve, but having that faith and trust that their sons and daughters are going to be taken care of when they enter the military. I just kind of would like to hear your thoughts on what do you think that the military can do better to kind of restore that trust and confidence. And Lisa, I'm going to start with you. If you can just talk a little bit about just some general thoughts on our communities that have been willingly given their sons and daughters to the military service.
Right. Well, I think you hit on it when you talk about trust. I mean, my family, mi familia takes care of me, right? Mi gente takes care of me. And so when I joined the military, that was my other family, right? I mean, I embraced my other family, and then to experience what I experienced for my brothers and sisters and how I was treated. I mean, that was amazing to me. I didn't expect that. It shook me to my core, So I had to fight really hard to, number one, just to stay in and gain the respect that my fellow, men had automatically, So, and then for women of color, I think it's even worse, So I just think that this is, we have to acknowledge that a serious problem exists in the military along these lines, and for people of color, especially for women of color. Latinos, I mean, we're very trusting. I mean, and when you break that trust, you have to go really a long way to get that back. And I think that's going to take the military, DOD, a while to do that. And then there's some ways we can do that. And I think we can start with some of the acknowledging we have a problem and the training. I think the training that we do now is frankly a CYA type of training. And I won't tell you what the acronym means, because I think most people know what that means. But I talked to a young soldier today who's in the reserves, and he told me it's still a CYA tactic that we use to train our people. The sexual harassment training is a PowerPoint training, and you put everybody in the unit in a room and you train them for hours. You don't separate them at all. So, I mean, at a minimum, you need to tailor it and make it more realistic, maybe even use realistic scenarios, case studies, mock scenarios, that kind of thing. But we're not effectively training in this area. And I know there's a lot more things we can talk about, but I know we are limited on time. But I think we have to go back to try to gain the trust. I think that's something, people are not going to send their sons and daughters into the armed forces if they can't be allowed to be trusted. If their other family, their military family can't take care of them and help them.
Thank you for that. That's, I think you're absolutely right that, that families are not going to be, they may not be as supportive. And so, Carrie, I'm going to ask you just kind of your own general thoughts about what, can be done to kind of restore that trust and confidence, or what impact you think that this situation has had on communities, in particular communities of color.
Right, yes. So absolutely, the military has to respond. And I really believe that the sexual assault programs in the various organizations have to be examined very closely. And each component, really, why is this failing? These programs are not new. They've been around for many years now, and it is not succeeding in preventing sexual harassment. So the prevention piece that Lisa talked about, of course, has to be addressed. The reporting piece, and every step in that program has to be re-examined and revised. And there has to be a very public effort to address this within the military. Otherwise, the trust is never going to be regained. If this is just a very quick look and go back to business as normal, the military will not be able to rebuild trust in any community.
Thank you, Carrie. And Michelle, I'm going to ask you the same question, just your general thoughts on the Vanessa Guillen case and what can be done to restore the trust, in particular for families or communities of color.
I will tell you, I start at the top. Granted, the latest thing that happened in Fort Hood, but when I read over and over again the number of general officers that get relieved, on accusations of sexual assault and sexual harassment, I think that speaks a lot to the lack of conscience and how important all these processes are. But if the people that you have that are the leaders and the supervisors are the first ones that don't abide by them and are the first ones, to be found guilty, to the point of criminal, it's very hard then to go in and challenge captains and majors, when the general officers, are providing such a bad example. And the other portion of it, as I mentioned before, it's this holistic approach that has to be done on the investigation. When you look at this case at Fort Hood, you got command climate issues, and there's a process for that. There's the sexual harassment piece, there's the arms room. But if you do not do a holistic approach on looking at this and what's really behind in that command, I think you'll never get to the bottom line. This is all tied in together on what is that leadership doing or not doing at Fort Hood.
Thank you. Oh, and that actually leads to a question. You've all kind of alluded to some things that we can be doing to eliminate or eradicate sexual harassment in the military. But is there if there's one particular thing that kind of just stands out to you that is like something that we need to do immediately or that we could do in the short term to at least really let people who are being sexually harassed know that that we're taking this seriously, because that really is the feeling from so many, is that it's not taken seriously enough, and especially people who have been victims of sexual harassment or sexual assault. So if there's one thing that really stands out to you that we can do either from a social or a policy change within the military, can you talk a little bit about that? And Carrie, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. If you can just give me your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think to begin with, the sexual harassment programs, the reporting piece, the investigation, all of that needs to start with a point of contact that is not a part of the military organization. Even if they are hired by the military organization, it should not be a service member in uniform that takes care of that. It really needs to be more independent of the organization. That in itself will make soldiers feel more confident coming forward. And the location where soldiers go to report. There are safe places that soldiers go to, such as a doctor's appointment, to wherever they worship. There can be offices that are co-located with that type of organization so that the soldier doesn't feel uncomfortable or like, they have to. Many soldiers are very, very controlled, especially if they live in a barracks, and are reporting where they're going or someone seeing where they're going. We need to create that safe location, and it needs to be independent. It can't be a person in military that they're going to report to. That's very distressing if the harassment is coming from someone already in uniform. So those are just two quick ideas that come to mind.
Thank you. Michelle, I'm going to ask you the same question. If you just can have, if you have some thoughts on what we can do immediately, or some things that just kind of stand out to you as a policy change that can be made to address or, to eradicate sexual harassment in the military.
I have to agree with Carrie that, we need to maybe do a pilot on looking at a third party, in the whole, the Army calls it SHARP, program. So that we give that opportunity of somebody on the outside where the person doesn't feel like if they go to that person, it's still going to stay within the military. And the other one is, women need to speak out. I had 5 months ago, I had a student here, a high school student who applied to the Air Force Academy, and during her interview, she experienced sexual harassment, and she knew of me. And was, brave enough to contact me. And then I, through my husband, who's an Air Force Academy grad, called the office, and we were able to actually do a report on the officer who did the interview, what he said, so that, somebody could do something about it. Because again, it's not just the person, but it's, who you're surrounded with that is willing to give you that support, to actually get to where you need to get at. And we find that, a lot of times that somebody's willing to do something, but they don't have that support structure behind, and a lot of times they give up.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much for those comments. Lisa, I'm going to ask you the same question. If you just have some general thoughts on what we can do immediately to address or to eradicate, help to eradicate sexual harassment and sexual assault in the military.
I think one of the things that's already been mentioned is this independent third-party reporting and investigative agency or arm. I think that is vital, and that can be done relatively, I think, simple and almost immediately. I think that needs to happen. I also think, and we talked about leadership, holding leadership accountable. We talked about some of these other things, climate surveys. I think all those are important. But one thing I think that we really haven't looked at really in depth is women continue to be the minority in the military. Why? Why have we not done a more concentrated, devoted effort to recruit more women, professionally develop more women, give them challenging assignments, stretch assignments, professional military school assignments, command billets, and promote more women so that we can build more women and put them in positions of power so that they can help lead all the branches, all the military services as well, right? Why haven't we done that? Why are we still having 15.3% in 2019 of all active duty are women? 15.3%. You know, we still have a problem. So, and I think until women see themselves as leaders, they see, like a Latina sees one of us and says, wow, you know, maybe one day I can be like that. And that happened to me when I was even a lower ranking person. I had a young airman come up to me and say, I was going to get out after my first enlistment till I saw you. And now I see that a Latina can actually get promoted and you know, maybe I can too. So, but you know, the power of role modeling, the power of mentorship, sponsorship, women and promoting them in positions, but we don't even have enough to start with because they're still at 15.3% of overall across all the military together. Now, some services have a little bit more, some a little bit less, but we still, I mean, where are our women? They're not serving in our military. And why are they not serving our military? Do they not feel safe to come into our military because of what's going on? Do they not get promoted? Why are women, when they get out of the service, we call them invisible veterans? A lot of them don't even self-identify that they're a veteran because of the terrible experiences a lot of them experience in the military. They don't have nothing to do for that male hyper-masculine organization. They want to be far away from that when they get out. They don't want to be associated with that. So I know I rambled, I'm sorry, but I think we need to look at the fact that we have not really done a concentrated push to even build the service up with more women.
Thank you. No, that is an excellent point. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, you telling the story about someone that was going to get out. I recall when I first joined, and I didn't introduce myself in the beginning, but, you know, I served in the Marines for 20 years. And after boot camp, I came home and I was working at a recruiter's office for 30 days. And I was out on the street in my uniform, and this lady was passing by. I was outside like of a grocery store, and a lady is passing by with her young daughter. And she stopped me and said, excuse me. She's like, are you a Marine? I said, yes, ma'am, I am. And she's like, oh my God, I didn't know there were women in the Marines. Look, mija, you can be a Marine too. And this was, I mean, of course, this was in the early 90s. I'm going to date myself as well, but you know, still at that point, you know, this woman didn't know that her daughter could join the Marine Corps. And so I think you're absolutely right. And it's a very valid point. I mean, if you really look at across not just the military, but in other areas in corporations, and we may be able to address some of these issues by putting more women in positions of power so that other women see, you know, leaders. And then not only that, I think a woman is going to be a lot more prone to stand up for another woman that she sees as being harassed, or actually be, you know, be more willing to hold somebody accountable. And so, which I think it leads us to another point, and it's about accountability. And I think that's what a lot of our country is really demanding right now after this Vanessa Guillen case, and that's accountability. You know, we've kind of touched on all of the things, right? If you're reporting to someone within the chain of command, you know, there's that fear that no one's going to be held accountable, and basically the victim gets re-victimized. So if you can just, you know, a short comment on accountability, and, you know, how can we improve that as a military service? So I'm going to start with Michelle. I'm going to ask you that question. And if you have any kind of general thoughts on accountability, and, you know, what can we do better as leaders as we move up, you know, to more effectively hold our own people accountable when we have situations like this?
So I think, and I know that a lot of people may be don't feel that evaluations are important, but evaluations, if you do not put on an officer's evaluation, the right kind of metrics, it sends a message, from a systems perspective that that's not important. And, my experience in my 30 years in the Army, most of what we talked about on accountability, was property accountability. There was very little that you got evaluated in terms of accountability of the consequences, and many times it was frowned upon, number of Article 15s that you give and that type of stuff, which is part of the accountability process. Because if you don't start at that low level and you think that everything can be handled, at the court-martial level, then we're really doing a disservice, to the system. But, when you don't have that kind of stuff on evaluations, I think it sends a very strong message that it's not something important. And accountability has to go beyond, counting how many trucks and weapons you have in your arms room. It's got to be, accountability of your actions. And I know that it's tough to evaluate it, but it can be evaluated.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. Lisa, I'm going to ask you the same question. Again, I think a lot of people are just really want accountability, and that might be a part of restoring that trust. So just your thoughts on what we can do better in terms of, holding our leaders and subordinates accountable in situations like these.
That's a difficult one because a lot of our evaluation systems are very inflated. And let's be real, so we have to be careful about that. But I agree with my colleague, there's ways to evaluate, to document this stuff. But I think the hardest part is when you say accountable, what does that mean? When you have to discipline an officer, a senior NCO, an officer who's in command, and you don't discipline them appropriately, you sweep it under the rug, so to speak. It's not a deterrent for others, and I think that's happened a lot in the military. So I think we need to be serious about the issues, and we need to, the punishment needs to be severe for the things that we measure and track. And this is a serious issue. So I think in the past, it has not been severe enough. And I think it needs to be enhanced. And we have to really look at the whole evaluation system because there is a lot of inflation in the system, and people are hesitant to accurately hold someone accountable on paper on their annual evaluation because they don't want to, so to speak, hurt their career. So we have to have some serious conversations about evaluation.
Thank you. Carrie, I'm going to ask you the same question. What, in your opinion, do you think that we could do better, or that we can do to ensure accountability within the chain of command, amongst our subordinates, and to Lisa's point, really to ensure that we're doing it in proportion to whatever the crime is, to restore that confidence and trust in our system.
Right. One thing that's super important is that when there is a report, every report has to be treated the same. Every report has to be thoroughly investigated and dealt with. What I found as a prosecutor is that some of the service members who were actually committing this harassment were in more senior positions, and they would prey on soldiers who were perhaps those who had gotten into trouble or who were, didn't have the best reputation in the unit. And then when a report comes forward, this sterling soldier in a leadership position is being accused by this soldier who maybe didn't have the best reputation in the unit, and it doesn't get the attention it deserves. It's assumed that the soldier is making this up. So to begin with, accountability starts with every report has to be taken seriously. We have to have a good reporting process, a safe and secure one. We have to take them seriously. They all have to be processed, whether, just withhold judgment and wait till all of the facts have been reviewed. And then I believe there will be more accountability. And in addition to that, what I have heard some men say is, oh, you're going to take every report seriously. Women are going to use that against us. I'm going to be accused of sexual harassment when a soldier doesn't like the detail I put her on, or something of that nature. You treat every report the same, you process them, it will all be determined if you are doing a good and thorough job. You cannot prejudge things or worry that it's not going to have the best result. You have to do it, and you have to do it thoroughly and properly.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for those comments. I completely agree with all of you and what you are saying. I mentioned earlier that as a result of this, a lot of women are coming forward and sharing their stories of sexual harassment or sexual assault. And we know that this situation has really triggered a lot of emotions. People are reliving experiences. I was personally at a vigil a couple of weeks ago, and I had a airman come up to me who was, I think, 12 days from getting off of active duty. And she just, wanted to share with me that she was grateful for what everyone was doing, and that she had never spoken about she had never told her story, and she broke down right then and there. And I know that this is having a huge impact on women and men too. I know, as we mentioned before, because men also get sexually assaulted, but for women in particular, that it's having a very severe impact on their emotional health. And so from the perspective of, people who are either, off of active duty now, veterans now, and even on active duty, what do you think that, we can do better as a society? What kind of change can we press Congress for to ensure that victims of military sexual trauma are taken care of, and that we're really meeting the needs? And and I kind of caveat that with Lisa. I know that you mentioned about women, and I've been serving in the veteran serving space for 7 years now, and I know that oftentimes women don't come forward to ask for help. Women don't enroll in the VA system as much as their male counterparts do. And so, what can we do to help, address that issue from either a societal perspective or from a legislative perspective to help address the needs of the mental health needs of our female veteran community? So I'll start with you, Carrie. If you can just, give us some ideas on maybe, what we can do better as a society or in terms of legislation to help women deal with the trauma that they've experienced.
I would say that this has been studied, and we have to relook that. We have to relook the studies. We have to understand the impact on women. We have to understand what women need to be able to deal with this type of trauma. I mean, of course, we want to eliminate the trauma to begin with, but while it's still happening, we need to know what's best in the interest of women who have suffered through sexual harassment, and how we can help them and build the programs to include that in the best way possible. If we just offer services that we think would be good, but it's not based on any scientific evidence or what the women actually need, then why would anyone come forward to get that help? So that, my first thought is that it has to be solid, based on research, and something that's really actually going to have an impact.
Thank you. Lisa, I'm going to ask you the same question. And I know you work with a lot of student and veterans, and, obviously a lot of females, anything that you see, some insight that you might be able to share on what you think we can do better to help address the mental health needs of women who have been victims of sexual assault, sexual harassment.
But I think first and foremost, we can believe them. I think that should happen, and you'd be surprised at how many people don't believe them when they do finally tell their story. And I think also they need respect for their service. Again, why do we have all these invisible veterans that don't even talk about or don't self-identify as vets? Because they're disrespected for their service. So that's why a lot don't even talk about it. But I think healthcare and healthcare delivery, and mental health care and mental health care delivery, we need to look at how we support our veterans, our women veterans, especially who've experienced MST, military sexual trauma, from more of an asset-based approach than a negative deficit-based approach. A lot of the stuff that's happening to support veterans comes from a negative deficit-based approach, assuming they're all broken and they all have all these negative issues, and they don't come to, veterans have so many great skill sets they bring and so many great things that they learned in the military, but we don't talk to them about that. A lot of people don't. they just talk about the negative things. They assume that they all have PTSD and they all got to do these bad things and people are afraid to hire them and whatever, you know. So I think we need to really look at this from a research like Carrie was saying, from evidence-based practice and look at this from an asset-based framework. I think that's important. Then I think a significant thing that needs to happen is women's healthcare services in the VA and women's healthcare delivery by the healthcare professionals needs to change. You know, I'm here in San Antonio también, you know, here with, along with Keta here, and there's a huge presence of women veterans in Bexar County in San Antonio. And we don't have a women's clinic, a big women's clinic as part of our VA hospital. The VA has basically let individual VA regional centers decide how they want to do that, right? Time and time again, I have women veterans come to me and say, I don't go to the VA for care because of the way I'm treated and because I have to walk through all these other areas just to get to the clinic I have to go to. And then the clinic's co-located with all the men's areas. You know, it's not a separate clinic, separate entrance for women. And I myself have experienced some of this myself and have been discriminated against while I'm trying to seek, let's say, GYN care at the VA, you know? So again, this is because women traditionally been the minority and the VA wasn't prepared to service and support so many women. They're trying, they're working hard to do it, but they need help. They need help to do this better. So I think some women don't come forward to the VA to get the care they need because of the way they're treated when they come forward. So I think you really need to look at healthcare delivery and then a diversity approach in healthcare delivery for the healthcare professionals.
Thank you. So Michelle, I'm going to ask you that question, and I will tell y'all that we are running a little short on time. So if you can keep the answer a little brief. Michelle, same thing. What you think we can do better to address the mental health needs of women who've experienced sexual assault or harassment in the military?
I will tell you that you know, my year plus at Walter Reed taught me a lot about how to handle invisible wounds, which is really what we're talking about here. So I think that there's a lot to learn on all the research and evidence-based you know, findings and research that has been done on how to handle invisible wounds. And again, you know, talking PTS and TBI, but the same thing could be applied on this topic. And I want to comment about the VA. I tell you, after listening to both of you, I feel blessed because the VA here in Puerto Rico, when you come in as a women veteran, you know, you first come into a, you know, general clinic, but you are given the option to sign up to go, you know, to be part of the women's health clinic. And not only are they dedicated for, you know, female veterans, but they do have a lot of programs, you know, to address women-specific challenges, such as the topic that we have here. Granted that our women population veterans here is fairly small. We only have around 4,000 female veterans. But again, I chose to go into the women's VA clinic, and, you know, and I love it.
Thank you. Well, that's really great to hear. We actually do have a really good healthcare system here in San Antonio, the South Texas Veterans Healthcare System. But yeah, I agree with Lisa that we could do better to, and there are women's programs, but we could do better to not force women to have to go through all of the, you know, being co-located with men and all of those things that just make them feel a little bit more, you know, safe and confident in the treatment that they're getting as women veterans. So I'm just going to ask, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but so I'm going to ask each of you as we wrap this up, just kind of some final thoughts or a call to action to our audience that's watching, that what they can do to help, you know, to help us, or, you know, final thoughts on sexual harassment or sexual assault in the military, or on the Vanessa Guillen case. It's really open to you, but just, you know, just some final thoughts. I will start with you, Michelle, if you don't mind just kind of giving us your closing comments.
So I would say that we have to stop sitting on the bleachers and watching and talking amongst ourselves, and we need to get out in the field and actually play ball where things are actually happening. And as a veteran, I will tell you, you know, we have one base here, Fort Buchanan, So, I'm constantly talking to mostly National Guard folks that we have there, but also, in our schools. So I think being in the military is a wonderful experience, but you can't go blind into the environment because, yes, we do have some issues. But it's important, to get involved. We can't just sit at the bleachers and talk about it.
Thank you. Carrie, I'm going to ask you for the same thing, just a minute or less, just a closing comment or any call to action.
Sure. It's tragic that Vanessa lost her life. So let's not let her death be in vain. The time is now to act. If you want to support this movement, there are ways you can do it. You can write to your congressman to hold the military accountable. I would encourage anyone who wants to do so to take a positive approach, to be for change rather than against the military, and to let our voices be heard as a community that we want this to change. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lisa, same to you, just some parting comments or any call to action that you'd like to share.
I agree with my colleagues. Well said. Well said. I'm honored to serve on this panel with you guys. And I was honored to serve my country. This is a great country. And I think it's time for us to really call Congress, get on Congress, and let's make some change. Actions speak so much louder than words. And we have great things written on paper, but the boots on the ground aren't feeling it. And we've let them down. And that's got to stop.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for your service first and foremost, and thank you so much for being on this panel. I think this is a really important discussion. Obviously, we have a long way to go in the military. There's a lot that we can do, and so I applaud you for being willing to be on this panel and share your thoughts and your parting comments with our audience. And to everyone who was watching, we thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope that you'll join this discussion and, like you heard, not sit on the sidelines, to call for action with your congressional representatives and make sure that Vanessa Guillen's death is not in vain. Thank you so much.